Tennessee State head coach Eddie George called out the school's fan base for what games they support and how often they come out to support. Oh, yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Family, welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saint Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day, every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Nah, it just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S, ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Grambling, they were this weekend's biggest losers. You're looking at Jackson State. One could argue the same for them, but they're a step below. But I do think that their season is kind of over. I don't think that there's much hope for SWAC championships and FCS playoffs. I think that's kind of out of reach. But before any of that, I'm going to say something I think may be controversial. Don't think it really should be, so I hope that it's not. But I think Eddie George was right. Eddie George, for about 2 minutes during his press conference, delivered a message. I wouldn't call it a rant. He didn't seem upset. Just felt like he was giving an observation and giving his opinion on the observation that he had. And that's about Tennessee State's fan base and what games they choose to support. And also how they support it. And when I heard what he said, I think he's right. I'm not at Tennessee State games. I don't live in Nashville. I'm not going to a bunch of them. I haven't even been to one yet. I plan on going to one eventually. I want to try to go through and hit multiple stadiums at some point over the probably next year. Right? I want to try to hit a couple other stadiums, but I'm not in Nashville. I'm not going to these games. I don't know the inner workings. But forgive me if I use the head coach as a reliable source. I can't give firsthand accounts of it, but I think that quoting Eddie George and looking at what he said, I'll say it's believable that there's not a lot of games that are being supported. Another reason I think that this is believable is because I see the way the media does this. I see the way Tennessee State gets treated. I see the way that Hampton, North Carolina A&T, I see how they get treated and how they're discussed on social media from fans who aren't in the media. I see all of these things. So it wouldn't shock me if Tennessee State fans are not really supporting games that aren't against HBCUs, because I hear the same thing about North Carolina A&T. So with that being said, Eddie George is completely right to say you should come out to more games than just the HBCU matchups. And not only did he do it in a way where I thought he was, I think he bordered the line of getting towards disrespect, but I thought he did it in a very respectful way. That's why I said he was on that border. He was walking that line because he started questioning the integrity of the fans. Are you really here for football? Because, let me give the quotes directly, and then we can say more about it. He said, I'm hoping that next week we'll have the same crowd that was here today. It was great. I would have loved for it to have been packed the entire game, not just up to halftime when the bands left, but we've got a special group, and I want our fan base to embrace that. The special group he's talking about is not the fan base. I'm sure he thinks they're special, but he's talking about his team. He's saying the team is good. I want them to be embraced by the fans. Continue. He said, I would really love for them to embrace us and support us no matter who we play. It doesn't have to be an HBCU. If you're a real fan of football and you're supporting and you're supporting Tennessee State football and the student athletes, come in the game and support us, and we'll all party at the end. It doesn't matter who we play is the key part there. Because at the end of the day, it shouldn't need to be a matchup. I see how HBCU media treats teams who leave the HBCU conferences, and I get it. Because at the end of the day, there's a little bit less focal points. If you're not succeeding, you're not going to get discussed. Like, I didn't talk much about Tennessee State last year. I didn't talk much about Hampton last year. I did talk a lot about North Carolina A&T. I didn't care that they were in the Big South. For me, they were a successful HBCU, and they were one whose story deserved to be told, right? But I understand that the shine that you get from the media standpoint might be different. Fans cannot operate that same way. That's not fandom to me. It doesn't sound like it's fandom to Eddie George either. See, I'm a fan of football. If Texas Southern were to go into the SEC and play Bama and Georgia and Texas A&M and LSU, guess who's going to be at those games? Me. I'm going to be at those games because I'm a fan of football and I'm a fan of Texas Southern. Right? And especially now where Tennessee State is. Tennessee State is a quality team. Somebody responded talking about, we've been supporting bad teams, X, Y, and Z. Well, then continue to support in the way that he's saying. If you're a supporter, there's no reason to really be upset. Because at the end of the day, to me, I think homecoming might have had a little something to do with why they left at halftime this time. But like he said in the interview, on the press conference, I should say, like he said in that press conference, it's more than just one game. He said, I've been here for 3 years. There's only a handful of games they support. And I'm assuming he means HBCU games. When the team is good or when the team is bad, that's one thing. When the team is good, let's pop out, let's support, let's show love because we deserve that. That's the way I look at it. Overall, I'll say this because I do think Eddie George is a smart guy. I think he's probably banking on calling them out and them popping out. I don't think he's expecting them because it's kind of like, I want you to come out and support our team. I want you to embrace and make noise on third down. It really helps us. To a certain extent, there's not much downside. Maybe when you question if they're really a fan of the team, maybe people getting their feelings. But overall, I think he's trying to inject a little bit of reaction into the fan base for them to come back out and support. That's kind of what I think is happening here. But overall, he is right. The premise that Tennessee State, an HBCU that is not in an HBCU conference, should be supported when they're not playing HBCUs is completely right. And I don't quite understand the way to say that he's wrong in that. Maybe you didn't like the delivery. Maybe you're not in the HBCU conference. Are you losing some of that? Yes. Are you going to limit your coverage? Yes. I understand those. I don't deny any of that. I don't. I understand that you're losing a certain level of experience. I don't want that to be lost. I will only speak for myself, I guess, and anybody I would know personally. Even if I lost that experience, if I'm an alum of the school, especially alums that been in the OVC, like y'all been in OVC for what, 40 years, like almost 40 years, 35 years, something like that. So they've been in the OVC for a while. A lot of this fan base are OVC people. This ain't new to you. But once again, I'll speak from my standpoint. I don't care what conference you're in. I'm a fan of football. I'm a fan of my school. I support my school. If I'm only coming when Tennessee State's playing Norfolk State or playing other HBCUs, I'm only coming for the vibes. And Coach George, you got to understand that a lot of people are only there for the vibes. A lot of people are only there for the vibes. Some are real fans of football. And to those who are real fans of football, support when everything is happening, not just when the vibes are at the highest. But you got to understand that there are a good amount of people who are just there for the vibes. So it's a little bit of both sides. But overall, I'm not tiptoeing and going back and forth. I'm going with Coach Eddie George. That's who I'm rocking with, who is right in this situation. Now, as much as he's calling out the fans, he's also saying, hey, we need you. You're useful. Like, we want you to show love. He's showing love to his team and saying he wants to do the same. So it's not just calling out the fans like, y'all don't support whoop, whoop, whoop. And he waited till he's off to his best start of his career as a coach. So he's at the height of his success as well. Really good timing. You can't use the word play better. They are. They feel like we got a chance to win a conference. He said that. I think he said that on Twitter, though. We got a chance to win this conference. Come out and support. I'm excited. I want you to be excited. And let's all be excited in the stadium affecting the opponent. But as we move forward, I want to talk about Jackson State because to me, JSU, after losing these past two games or their second game in the conference, to Alabama State, the season's kind of over. I don't really know where you go from here as far as SWAC championship aspirations. But let's look at why I say that in further depth as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time, and Game Time is the place for all your last-minute ticket sales. So I just came back from the New Orleans Saints Houston Texans game. Didn't go too great for my squad, but I had a good time. So isn't that what really matters at the end of the day? But anyway, if you were one of those, or if that was one of the games that you wanted to go to, but you just didn't have the chance, then you got to check out Game Time next time, because you're thinking, oh man, I waited too late. But there's no such thing as too late when it comes to Game Time. That doesn't exist, because even at the last moment, you can get some of the best prices available. Now, if you find after you purchase, you can find a seat on the same section in the same row as the one you did purchase, they'll back you or repay you 110% of the difference. That's how confident they are that they'll have the best prices. So go ahead and snag the tickets without the stress when you use Game Time. Download the app and create an account and use the code Locked On College if you want $20 off your purchase. Terms, of course, are going to apply, but make sure to use the code Locked On College to get $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest priced, guaranteed. Today's episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks, and Prize Picks is the spot for all of your daily fantasy. Excuse me. So you want to make sure that you pick 2 to 6 players. Doesn't matter the sport. You can do NFL, you can do the NBA, you can do anything in between, right? All you have to do is say, are they going to get more or are they going to get less than the projected numbers? If you're saying Jonathan Taylor's going to have X amount of running yards, or he's going to have more, is he going to have less? If you're looking at Jamar Chase, he's going to have this amount of wide or receiving yards. Is he going to have more? Is he going to have less? You can do that each time. It's daily fantasy made easy. It's simplistic, easy to use. I love it. It's because all you have to do is go in there and test your own knowledge. You're not going against every other player. You just have to guess on the things that you already know. So go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Again, that is prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege, and use the code lockedoncollege to get your first deposit matched up to $100. It's $100 first deposit, first deposit up to $100 matched at prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. And remember, on Friday, we'll have our college football kickoff live, meaning you'll have all of the biggest stories around the college football landscape to make sure that you end up a smarter and more informed viewer or listener. It'll be live on the podcast YouTube page, but also have the recording or the video on the YouTube and podcast page after the fact. I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. We have a little bit of a later episode today, in the evening as opposed to the morning. But as you heard in the read, I was coming back from Houston. I wanted to make sure that I could get you guys the best show. I didn't want to rush anything. So let's make sure that we get this going well. That being said, Jackson State, I think the season is over. Now, obviously, you still have a couple of games left and you're still playing for pride, but at the end of the day, it's kind of like when you were mathematically eliminated from the playoffs in the NFL. Okay, well, that season is over. Season isn't over, but your season is over, right? That's kind of how I feel here. You're not quite mathematically eliminated, but I think the options or the chances, the odds, however you want to phrase it, of them making it to the SWAC championship game or really any postseason play, slim to none. Now, we spoke about this situation a week ago when facing Alabama A&M, because to me, Alabama A&M was a game where you're going in, and if you lose, I don't think you have chances to make it to the SWAC championship. You won that game. Cool. I didn't bring it up again against Alabama State because that's lazy to just have the same exact storyline back-to-back weeks, but it was still true, and now you lost to Alabama State. So now you're just in the same situation that I said you could have been had you lost to A&M. This time you just lost to the other game or the other team in Alabama, right? So let's get into it, because you might not have seen that episode a week ago, right? You might not have made it to that segment, whatever. Some of you could have got interrupted, right? So basically, now Jackson State has 2 losses within the conference, and I think that's a hole that is too much to make up. I don't believe that they can make it to the SWAC championship game, and we'll get into the FCS playoffs towards the end. Let's look at the road that they could take, and everything is based upon them winning out. I'm not going to say Jackson State wins out every time. I might not say it at all, but everything is based upon JSU winning every single one of their games, right? Because to me, I think overall it's FAMU, and I think we're going to come in here in a little bit and say FAMU has clinched the division. But let's move with all the scenarios until that one scenario happens. Jackson State, FAMU. If FAMU loses 3 games, Jackson State has a chance. If we're just talking about head up, two-way tie with the top dog in the conference, which is always a possibility. Well, first off, you can't tie, but let's just say that it's just you and them. You're going to need FAMU to lose 3 games because you've already lost 2 and they beat you, so a tiebreaker doesn't work. So you need them to lose 3 games. They have 4 left. I don't think that happens. Personally, I just don't think that happens. They have 3 quality opponents who, yeah, if they beat them, I wouldn't be shocked. Or they have 2 quality opponents and they have a rivalry game, but 3 quality opponents for them. I don't think they're going to lose all of them. I'd be shocked. I'd be shocked if FAMU lost all 3 of those games. You know, I don't see FAMU losing more than 2 games this year in conference. I just don't. But okay, let's say you can get into a 3-way tie because you do have other teams in the conference and maybe they might be able to help you out. A 3-way tie, how does that work? You have 2 options for your 3-way tie now: Alabama State, Alabama A&M, FAMU plus either one of those teams. Just to be clear. I don't think Jackson State wins either one of those 3-way ties. I could be wrong. But you have to have a loss or a team has to lose between Alabama State and Alabama A&M. Like that just has to happen. They play each other. They both have 2 losses in the conference. One has to go down to 3. Just has to. October 28th, we'll see who it is, but one of them has to drop down to number 3 or third loss. FAMU could lose 2 games. So Jackson State have 2 losses, FAMU has 2 losses, and let's say Alabama State has 2 losses. Because that's the quickest tiebreaker. Jackson State lost to both of those teams. They lose that tiebreaker. Boom, you're done. 3-way tie, you lost to both of the other 2 teams. You lost it. FAMU has beat both. Even better yet, FAMU has beat both of you. So that doesn't even matter. FAMU has beaten you and they've beaten Alabama State. Enough said. But if you wanted to go to that level, Alabama State has also beaten Jackson State and FAMU. So like JSU is last in that. They're out. And as we look at a potential 3-way tie between Alabama A&M, FAMU, and Jackson State, because I want to get into that, it's a little bit more intricate. I wouldn't say complicated, but my hope is when I say things are intricate or complicated, I come on and I express it in such a way that you're like, you're exaggerating. This was not complicated at all, because that just means I did a good job of explaining it. But a 3-way tie between FAMU, Alabama A&M, and Jackson State will be the first team eliminated because I went through it on a 3-way tie because there's different rules for each one. And I believe the first one that would apply to this situation is a divisional record because no team would have beaten both of the other 2. In this hypothetical scenario, Alabama A&M, because they already have 2 losses, has to win out, meaning they would have beaten FAMU. So now FAMU beat Alabama A&M, or Alabama A&M beat FAMU, FAMU beat Jackson State beat Alabama A&M, right? This is just hypothetical, but let's just say a 3-way tie where both teams did not lose to one opponent. Alabama A&M would only have 1 divisional loss because Southern is a West team, not an East team. Jackson State already has 2. You're already out. Whether FAMU has 1 or they have 2 divisional losses, you are already out as Jackson State. And if I'm not mistaken, a 3-way tie between these 3 teams would go the way of Alabama A&M because with Alabama A&M only having a 1 divisional loss, and the best that FAMU could do is having 1 divisional loss, they would either go to a head-to-head in which Alabama A&M won that game, or they would just go with a 3-way tie and say who has the least divisional losses. Either way, that goes to Alabama A&M. So that's a way that the Bulldogs could win the conference, and that would kind of surprise me because I just haven't looked at them as the conference championship contender for real. Before we get into Alabama A&M's opponent from last week, Grambling, I want to look at the FCS playoffs because I think that's off the table, and I think it's really quick. You lost 2 games in your conference. I already think that might be too much. You got whooped by Texas State. You played 3 out of conference games. 2 of them were against HBCU opponents, one being Southern, one being South Carolina State. That's not going to be graded or scored or valued, however you want to phrase it, highly by the polls. They're not. We might like the way that they beat South Carolina State. We might feel like Southern was a quality win, but I don't think that the polls and the voters will feel the same way. So there's that. And that's and it's, not only that, you got beat by Texas State badly. You're not ranked. Like, it's just a lot of things where I don't think that they make the playoffs. I just think there's too many things stacked against them. And it's not even their fault. as far as how people view the SWAC opponents. If you're in a different conference and you lost 2 games in conference and then you just lost to Texas State, you might have a chance. But in the SWAC and the MEAC, you don't. This ain't my way of saying what it should be. I'm just telling you what it is. I think that's the truth. So no FCS playoffs. We just went through on the long form of why the SWAC championship is pretty much off the table. So now it's like you're being eliminated from the playoff contention, just not mathematically at this point. So as we move forward, let's get back to Alabama A&M and the team that they beat, which is Grambling, because Grambling is actually the biggest loser from this weekend's action. And we'll look at why as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Athletic Brewing, and I want to look at our game changer of the week. And for me, it has to be Eddie George. I know that sounds crazy because he's not a player, but I just feel like the way that he called out the fan base and what he said to them was kind of game changing. And it reminds me of Athletic Brewing, because Athletic Brewing is a game changer for non-alcoholic beers because they stand toe to toe with the alcoholic brews. They do. And I'm talking about in competitions, not Athletic Brewing actually ends up being your champion. They end up winning these competitions with some of the alcoholic beers. So for me, just like Eddie George, Athletic Brewing has changed the game. So go to Athletic Brewing. You heard me, athleticbrewing.com to make sure you get yours today. You get 15% off your offer if you use the code Locked On College. And you can even get them in store, but if you go online, you can use that code Locked On College for 15% off your offer. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Grambling was this weekend's biggest loser for me, and I understand that technically Howard lost by the most points. Jackson State season is over. But even with all of that, I still kind of felt like Grambling was the biggest loser just because it felt so shocking. Maybe that's my fault. Alabama State beating Jackson State, not so shocking. It's not like it's something I didn't expect or didn't see coming, I should say. I knew that could happen. But I just thought Grambling was going to beat Alabama A&M. I did. Matter of fact, I think I might have went on here. I was about to, even though FAMU couldn't have done it anyway, I looked up the score with preparation to say, yeah, FAMU's about to clinch. That's really why I looked it up with that exact thought process. Even though that's not even true, I didn't really think about it at the moment. That's how much I thought Grambling was going to beat Alabama A&M. So that's part of why I felt like they were the biggest loser, because you know what? This caught me off guard, especially the way it happened. Especially the way that it happened. But let's set up the scene. So a week ago, the SWAC West reset. The 4 top teams all had 1 loss. Grambling, Southern, Alcorn, Prairie View A&M, all had 1 loss within the conference. And now Grambling becomes the first team to drop down to 2 losses. So with Grambling dropping down to 2 losses, you're looking at them just a week ago, right? Just 2 weeks ago, 2 games ago, when they're going into that matchup with Alcorn. When Grambling's going into that matchup with Alcorn, they were in the driver's seat. And in a matter of 2 games, they're now searching for a ride. And that's just crazy to me, especially when you stack these games up next to each other. When you look at when they lost to Alcorn, not the last drive of the game, but a 4th quarter game-winning drive. You're looking at the way they lost to Alabama A&M, and it was bad. So now you kind of get pressed into the situation where you start questioning heavily. Not them, but us. We start questioning heavily. And I'm like, dang, did this offense is struggling. What's going on? Did this team peak? Now, if Alcorn had the same exact situation, am I reacting this way? No, I'm not. But Grambling has overachieved based upon my own preseason expectations. So when Grambling overachieves based on my expectations, and then they start having moments like this with back-to-back losses, I'm like, the second week in a row that your team hasn't scored 20 points. Hasn't scored 30 points. That's concerning. You typically score 30 points. What's going on here? It's little stuff like that, but it's only because of where they stand. That's it. Alabama A&M has a really good offense, high-scoring offense. They have a really high-scoring offense. I wasn't appreciating how good they were, and I wasn't able to watch this game, unfortunately, because it wasn't even televised. I think it was only on the radio. So I wasn't able to check out this game. So I don't know exactly how they looked. But when Xavier Langford runs for nearly 200 yards, when he had 280 last year as a whole, only had 82 coming into this game, that's concerning. That's the kind of stuff that had me scared about the Grambling defense going into the coming out of the Hampton game. Like, oh, y'all don't know how to stop the running back and the quarterback exchange and the read options. Specifically, you don't know how to stop the quarterback. You look lost. Now you let 200 yards up. I would love to know how that 200 was reached, but you let up 200 nonetheless. So now I'm sitting here kind of concerned. Like, dang, what's happening? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening? I don't know. But the good thing about it is the season isn't over. Grambling's coming out next week, and they're going to have a bye week. They get to sit back and they get to watch Alcorn play UAPB. They get to see Southern face Bethune-Cookman. Those aren't the best teams in the conference, so I don't know if you're banking on them to beat you or beat your opponents for you, but hey, it is what it is. They were the only team in the conference, in the division, that had not the division. They're the only team of the four. Alcorn, PV, Grambling, Southern. They were only one of the four who actually ended up scoring or playing. I'm sorry, I'm so thrown off. I think I'm a little bit lagged from the drive, to be honest. But they were the only one of the four who ended up playing in a conference game, and they lost. PV didn't play a conference game. Southern didn't play a conference game. Alcorn didn't play at all. Grambling played a conference game, and they lost. In a situation where it seems like you're about to have a Wild West, every single conference game is a big deal. And that's why I labeled them the biggest loser of the weekend. And as we move forward on tomorrow's episode, we'll look at FAMU's road to clinching because we talk about it, but I think it's a real possibility now. We're now really looking at when will FAMU clinch this division and secure their spot in the SWAC championship game. So we'll look at that at a deeper level, and then also have a statement about Southern. So we'll be back pretty soon. We'll be back on probably tomorrow morning. I'm gonna aim for tomorrow morning to early afternoon, but we won't be late like 5 o'clock. We're gonna get in the lab. We're gonna go ahead and get active. So I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, even on our later episodes. In the meantime, in between time, if you're looking for me, you can find me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.